Hello, everybody. How's it going? Ben Gothard here with another Project Egg interview, and today we're talking to Shaun Buck from San Francisco. How you doing today, Shaun?
I'm doing very well, Ben. How are you?
Awesome, man. Thanks for asking. Glad to have you on the show. So let's jump right in. My first
Yeah.
question for you, Shaun, is what is your story?
What's my story? So my story is a little bit different than most people's, right? So I had a really unique life event happen to me. I get this phone call at 16, so I was a really, really young, right? And I get this phone call, and it's from my ex-girlfriend, and she's telling me about her good news. She has some really good news for her, and that's that she's pregnant. And I'm like, well, that's congratulations, I guess. Why are you calling to tell me? And she then informs me I'm going to be a dad at 16. So it was like really scary times, right? And now listen, I had just recently gotten a raise at my job as Chuck E. Cheese at Chuck E. Cheese's, and I was now making $4.25 an hour. Now I'm actually not a very smart guy. But I was smart enough to realize that that probably wasn't going to do it for me. That wasn't going to cover, diapers and formula and, medical and stuff like that. And so I had to go out and get a job, and then ultimately that's what set me down an entrepreneurial path of opening businesses and trying new businesses and starting businesses and failing at businesses, from probably about the age of 21 was when I went full time. So I had little small businesses like sold pagers to my friends, which you probably have no idea what a pager is because you're too young. But they were before cell phones. And anyhow, so sold pagers to my friends, and I had a couple hot dog stands, out there in the Bay Area, and raised my son, and who now actually turns 21 in about 10 days. So. Yeah, so it's been a pretty cool adventure.
That's awesome, man. So, I know that might be a little bit of a sensitive topic, but I think it's really impactful if we can maybe dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, go for
Um,
it.
so, when you got that phone call, and you were hit with that news, um, how did that translate into entrepreneurship in the way that you acted in your actions? Like, what specific actionable steps did you take in order to start the entrepreneurial path at that time?
Yeah, I mean, at first it just translated into fear, right? I was scared, but I realized that I needed to do something else, right? So I couldn't make minimum wage. I had to better myself, and so I went and found a commission sales job. And that was my first step. And although that's not entrepreneurial, by definition, to some extent, a commission sales job is entrepreneurial because if I didn't go out and sell, if I didn't get up and hustle every day, then guess what? I didn't make any money that day. And my very first month at my commission sales job, I worked for a company called The Good Guys, which is basically like Best Buy, is what it is, right? So, and I sold computers back when I first started. We were selling like 386 and 486 processor computers. In fact, shortly after I started, the first Pentium processor came out. Like that's so I'm aging myself now here, but so I'm 37 right now, and that's how long ago that was. I sold computers. In my very first month, I'm maybe 17 years old now. My son's been born, and my very first month I make $5,000 selling computers. And so I realized, okay, if I get up every day and I go out and I hustle and I work hard, that I can make a lot of money. And so I also went into a bookstore very shortly after I got the news. And the first thing I did was I gathered all the business books I could find, and I started reading them. In fact, I picked up a business book by a now friend of mine, but his name's Dan Kennedy, a marketing guru. And I picked up a business book by Dan, and that was one of the first books I bought. I couldn't buy many of those books because I didn't have a lot of money, so I read a lot of them at Barnes and Noble, and only bought one or two here or there when I could actually afford, a $15 book or whatnot, which was difficult back when I was 16 years old. So. But yeah, I mean, it started to me studying and me learning, and I've spent more money on my education than than a couple people going to Harvard. I mean, I'm constantly learning and educating myself and improving myself, and finding out what works. And so those were some of the first steps I took once I found out that I was going to be a dad and had this whole responsibility I had to deal with.
Wow. Wow. So you said one of the first things that happened was that you were kind of overcome by fear, right? Or
Sure.
that you at least met fear, right?
Yeah.
So can you talk about how, and I know your situation is different from most, but I think that fear, whether it be the fear of failure or unworthiness or just, the fear of responsibility, that fear is very gripping, and
Yeah.
it stops a lot of people from doing the things that they need or want to do. So could you talk about how to overcome that fear and at the very least deal with it at a fundamental level?
Yeah. I mean, I read somewhere at one point. I can't remember who said it, but it was the quote went something like this. Show me a man who has never failed, and I'll show you a man who's never accomplished anything. And that's really true, in life. And you have to take risk. And so what happens is to overcome fear, you need confidence. And that's how you get past fear. But you only get confidence by going out and succeeding at stuff, right? So it's really this like chicken and egg problem. And so what you need to do is you need to go in and you need to take some actions that lead to success. And you start to build your confidence. And you need to understand that failing is a natural part of the entrepreneurial process. See, we're taught in school that to fail, to get an F, is a bad thing. But here in the real world, as an entrepreneur, failing is just one little bump along the road to success. And it's not about whether you get it right the first time, you're successful, or you fail. It's about whether you pick yourself back up and you move on. And see, the other reason people get scared, especially fear of failure, is that they try to go all in. Okay, and if I'm going all in, I'm naturally going to be scared, right? And when I'm scared, I make different decisions, typically bad ones. So I don't want to go all in too often. So I want my steps to be very calculated. I want them to be well thought out. I want to run through pros and cons. Okay, so I want scenarios of if this doesn't work, here's what I'm going to try. But I very rarely want to go all in. I want to take small, very methodical, very thought out steps and progressions towards my goal. And I think that helps people overcome that fear.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, one of the things that you touched on that I really like is overcoming failure, right? I think that it was profound what you said, that failure is just another bump on the road to success. And I agree with you 100%. But at the same time, in order to allow failure to be that small bump and not let it overcome us, I think it is really important that we learn from that failure and that we grow from it. So could you maybe give a little bit of insight on how you personally learn and grow from your own failures?
Yeah, so I evaluate, so we'll think about it from a marketing standpoint, right? When we do a marketing campaign that doesn't work, we evaluate what parts of the campaign we think worked and what parts didn't work and why. Okay? And then that's where we learn from the why it didn't work. Now, sometimes it's not clear cut. Sometimes it's not always, just this black and white, like here's exactly what happened. But we use our best educated guess to figure out why it didn't work. Now, here's the big lesson, though. You have to be a realist, because this is where most business owners mess up, is they don't realize that their inability to execute the campaign properly was what actually caused the campaign not to work, not that the campaign was bad. It's, direct mail or Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever marketing you're using, those things all work. If you can't get it to work, then there's something wrong either in your business model or there's something wrong in your strategy or your execution. It very rarely is the media. Most people can make most medias work. Now every now and again there's a media that just doesn't make sense for your business model, and that's okay. But most people they instantly blame the media. It's the media sucks. New movers don't respond to offers, or people on Facebook don't buy business to business, or whatever the excuse is, right? Which is just not true. So it's just this evaluation, and it's making sure you take the time to learn the lesson. You have to sit there and evaluate what worked, what didn't work. You have to be honest with yourself, and it's completely okay if what didn't work was that you sucked. Like that's okay. Learn from that and don't suck next time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I like how you put that. It's just very genuine. So when you are evaluating it, and you're trying to learn from your mistakes, and you're trying to figure out whether you suck or something else happened. how do you do that, right? Because a lot of the times we don't know what we don't know. And
That's
so
right.
if we're just getting into a new platform, let's say, a new advertising platform, to go with that example,
Yep.
how do we know what exactly it is that messed up? Like, how do we pinpoint exactly where the problem is?
Well, so here's the beauty of the world we live in today. We have all the answers available to us, all of them. Every answer you want. It's more about the questions you ask than it is about finding the information to get the answer, right? So there are forums where you could go and have someone who has more experience look at it. Maybe you have a mentor that you could go and ask. Maybe there's a third-party provider that you might want to hire to do the service that you can show them the campaign and say, hey, here's what we did before. Do you know why it didn't work? And then use that as one of your interview techniques to decide if you're going to hire that company, right? It's really about the question that you're going to ask yourself. So why didn't it work? Might even be too broad. You might want to, okay, so why it didn't work? That would be the start of the question, right? Now we're going to go with our hypothesis. What do we think happened, right? And then we're going to go do some research and find some people who maybe have that experience. Go read a book. Go study a little bit on it, because if you want to do it again, you might need to grab a little more information before you actually go and roll it out and spend another $1,000 or $5,000 or $100,000 or whatever your budget is, right? And so, we have all the answers. We just need to make sure we're asking the right questions. And it's the beauty of the world we live in today. It's both a blessing and a curse, to be honest with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's touch more on your history. So
Yeah.
you said that the first thing that you did, or one of the first things that you did once you got that news, was you went and you got a paid sales commission job,
Nope.
right?
Nope.
And you said you were selling pagers, I believe.
No, so I had a pager company. I was selling computers.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So you
Yeah.
were selling computers. Did those things happen simultaneously, or you first started with the sales? What was kind of the chronology of that?
Yeah. So I started with the sales first because I needed just to earn more money than, I was probably making about $175 a week. So, and that was if I was working full time, which I probably wasn't at 16 years old, right? So, I wasn't making any money, and so I needed more money first. I had to have to stop the bleeding in a sense, and so I went out and got the sales job first. And then while I was doing the sales job, I was doing a lot of studying, and I was dabbling part time in little businesses, right? So the pager company, recycled printer cartridges were becoming huge. I did a little bit of that. So I was dabbling like really part time in some businesses. Owned a traffic school. So before, you used to get a ticket and you'd have to like go to a physical class for 8 hours and take traffic school. Now you go online and take an online traffic school. But back in the day, you had to go to a physical class. Someone had to hold those classes. Myself and a business partner held those classes. So there was a lot of little kind of dabblings in business that I did, and they all kind of failed. I made a few bucks on the pager company, and I made basically nothing on the recycled cartridge company. Probably lost money on that, getting started in that, and the traffic school was a loser. Lost money on that, and so there was a lot of little try and fail, try and fail, try and fail type of businesses.
Absolutely. So when you jumped into that sales role,
Yep.
what were some of the things that you really took away from that? And I know you mentioned how if you take massive action, you can make a lot of money, right? And you said you made that $5,000 your first month, but
Yep.
I'm talking specifically sales wise. What were some of the biggest takeaways and actionable tips that we can share with the community?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, follow up is king, and so few people are good at it, right? They go in and they get us they talk to a prospect. The guy doesn't buy immediately, and they're on to the next prospect, right? And it's just such a really a poor man's way to do business for the most part, right? And it shows it's a little bit amateur hour, right? And we've all been there, so I'm not trying to insult anyone. I've done it before too, but follow up is king. And whether that's retargeting follow up, whether that's sending a print newsletter like my company does, whether that's emails, and really the best thing is whether it's all of that, right? It's everything, and which is really the world we live in today. And so you got to follow up. That was one thing. I also learned that you have to ask for the sale multiple different times, but you have to do it in a way that is not like where you're annoying, right? So if I'm like, Ben, hey, would you like to buy my product? And you say no, and I go, well, but I really like you to buy my product. Can you buy my product? You're gonna say no again, right? I haven't added any value to that, right? But if I come in and I say, so I've given you all the information here, Ben. Would you like to buy my service? And you say no. And I say, well, have you considered ABC, XYZ? I go, well, I haven't considered that. Yeah, so when you think about that, I think this is a really good fit. Maybe this is something we should do. Maybe you say no again, and I ask you a third time, but I add more value. I keep increasing the value. I keep the conversation going, and giving you new reasons to reconsider your decision. And a lot of times you have to ask up to 5 times. But you have to do it in a tactful way that's adding value and it's giving someone a reason to reconsider their decision. And if you'll ask 5 times, you have an 80% more likely chance of getting a yes. And on small sales, it's like the odds of getting a yes are like 100% more. It's really, really easy to do. And you don't have to ask 5 times, you only have to ask twice. So, just ask for the sale. So few people ask for the sale. And then if they do, they ask once and then they never ask again. So I think if most people would just do those 2 things, better follow up and ask for the sale more times by adding more value and doing it in different ways, their sales would grow, quite a bit.
Absolutely. Now, for those listening, what I don't think the takeaway should be from that message is that you should just go and never leave somebody's door and continuously saying, buy my product, buy my product, buy. Don't do it 5 times in a row, right? Like Shaun said, you have to be tactful about it. So maybe we could dive into a little bit more, in depth on that. What is the time frame, right? So you said about 5 times is optimal. What is the time frame for that? And maybe you could give some insights on the type of value and examples of extra value that you can give to people when you are asking additional times.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the type of sale you're asking for. Okay, so let me give you an example from my days in the selling computers. Okay, and this will be, I've got one opportunity here, right? The one opportunity I have is you're standing at the register, you're purchasing a computer, and I'm trying to sell you a warranty. There is no time frame. You either buy right then and there, or you don't buy. That's really the 2 options. There's very little very little chance for a third chance. So in that instance, I might have to say, hey Ben, we've got a 5-year protection plan on this computer, which sounds crazy today, but back then, people thought they were going to buy a computer and it was going to be like a TV. They kept it, for years and years and years. So we got this 5-year protection plan on this computer, and this computer's back then it might have been $4,000 for a Pentium processor computer, right? It's $4,000. I mean, seriously, Ben, if a motherboard goes out, what are you going to do? I mean, it's going to cost you $1,000 to fix a motherboard, and this warranty is only $500, and you should totally pick it up. And you'd be like, yeah, I think I'm okay. And be like, well, a recent Wall Street Journal article said that the average computer breaks XYZ number of times, over a 5-year period, and that they highly suggest the warranty. So you see how that in that situation, all I can do is continue to give more information and ask for the sale. Okay, most of us aren't in that situation though. We don't have to go in that kind of more high pressure tactics. And so what we want to do is we want to look at it from the standpoint of, let's say I'm trying to get a phone appointment. I'm doing it via email. I've got email marketing campaign going out, and I'm trying to get someone to schedule a phone appointment. Well, so now that's really simple to add value, right? Instead of just sending over an email every day that says, would you like to have an appointment with me? Click here to schedule an appointment. That's horrible, right? I'm going to send over and say, hey, Ben, I know that you have this amazing, business here, and I found this really cool article on this business, and I thought you'd be interested in, I'd love to discuss this with you and more about your business and how I think we can help. Here's a link for you to check us out. And then, 2 or 3 days later, another email pops out that says, hey, Ben, check this out. I found this really cool video on how to grow XYZ company, and go ahead and watch it. It's only 4 minutes, and then let's jump on a call and have a quick conversation, right? And I can build that campaign out that maybe runs over the course of a couple of weeks. Depends on your market, how fast you need to make that sale, right? But the whole point is that I'm adding value at every step. I'm not just saying buy my stuff. I'm saying, hey, here's something cool I thought of you when I saw it. Now come and let's talk as well too. So, so that's probably a more applicable way to do it for most of the people who are watching or listening to this.
I like that. I like that strategy a lot. So it's over time nurturing the leads
Of course.
nurturing these people and actually building a relationship by giving, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I think that's one of the key takeaways, and I think a lot of what you said is profound.
Yeah,
So
givers get.
yeah, exactly. So let's again go back into your history because I'm really interested in it.
Cool.
So at the time when you started selling computers, you said you started dabbling in a few other things.
Yep.
Um, could you talk a little bit about how you chose those specific businesses, right? Like why did you decide to start the traffic school, and why did you decide to do the recycled cartridges, and what
Yeah.
was your thinking behind all of those things?
So back then, honestly, my thought was I wanted to make a lot of money. And to tell you the truth, horrible reason to do anything. Okay, anything in life, I want to make a lot of money is the worst possible reason. And I've unfortunately had to learn that lesson a couple of different times. But I've now learned it very well. And I don't do something because I think it's going to make me money. I do something because I'm passionate about it and I love it. Now, it has to also make money, right? So, I mean, I'm passionate about watching college football. I just can't make any money at it. Okay, so it can't be one thing or the other. It has to be both. And so that's a really important thing. But yeah, those were all just. I got a ticket. I had to go to traffic school. I'm like, you know what? These guys are making a killing over here. I could do this way better than they can. Let me do this. I read an article in a magazine called Small Business Opportunity Magazine, and it was that I believe is still out now, and it was about how cartridges are killing it. This guy was making $2 million a year, and I was like, you know what, I could do that, and I found a course, an information marketing course on it, and I bought it, and I was in the recycled cartridging business. Pagers, kind of the same thing. I'm like, all my friends want pagers. It's not very hard to buy pagers and sell them a quarterly subscription. Like it was all about making money. And that's where most people, when they're new into entrepreneurship, that's where they start. Either that or they do sometimes go the opposite spectrum. I love, college football. So I'm going to start we all get together and watch college football in parties business, but there's no money in that business. You can't actually, no one's going to pay you for that. So those are usually the two areas people start, and they're the worst reasons to start a business.
Absolutely. And so once you had started and closed shop on a few different businesses,
Yeah.
what was the first one that really hit, right? And maybe if you had
Yeah.
started a few more before the couple that we talked about, maybe you could talk about those on the way to your first real success.
Yeah, no, those were really the first three. And then the first one that hit, I started when I was around 20-ish years old. I was in 2011, and it was called Woody's Hot Dogs. And I bought a pair, so that's two of them, a pair of hot dog stands in front of Lowe's home improvement stores. And I sold hot dogs, and it was Woody's Hot Dogs. It was a franchise. I spent $45,000 on the first one and $35,000 on the second one. So my advice of don't go all in, well, I didn't take it back then. I went all in. This was like all the money in the world I had. And, I went on all these hot dog stands. Now, the good news was we did about $500,000 a year in sales out of these two hot dog stands. And so that was the good news. Bad news was I didn't know what I was doing running a business. It was all cash. People were ripping me off. And I was only making maybe, 60,000 bucks a year, which sounds like, wow, that's great. But the job I left, I was making 120 some odd $1,000 a year. So to go from 120 to 50, and that was 50 was the second year. The first year I only made 30. So, it really wasn't that great actually. So, but I did ultimately sell those businesses for a lot more than I paid for them, which is great. But that was my kind of first success. I quickly realized, even though at the time I lived in the Bay Area, it still gets cold in the wintertime in the Bay Area. And so I only had those businesses for about 18 months. See, I spent my college years, although I did go to college for a few years until I found out that I made more money than my professor and actually had more real life business experience than he did, since he'd never owned a business, but he was my business professor. I did give it a crack, but I did what some people do. They jump from major to major to major, and I jumped from business to business to business. So I only had that one for 18 months before I sold both of them and moved on to the next business venture.
So can you talk about from the time when you bought the hot dog stands
Yep.
until that time when you were doing $500,000 in sales?
Yep.
How did you do it, right? Because for a lot of entrepreneurs, They're struggle to make any money at all, and so
Sure.
to go from negative 45 or negative 80, if you count
Yeah.
both of them, to 500,000 in revenue. What was the progression? How did you do it?
See, on that one, I can't take a lot of credit for, to be honest with you. I mean, we were in front of Lowe's Home Improvement. They had a multi-million-dollar marketing budget. We had really good hot dogs, and people would just come in and get the hot dogs and run out. So, to be honest with you, on that one, it was luck more than it was anything. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I was just completely skillful and masterful at it, but I'd be lying to you. And it was just that they had a big marketing budget. We had good products, and there you go. So. Yeah, nothing too special there. Now, the next one had a lot more skill involved. And I can talk about that and answer that question if you'd like in that one.
Absolutely, and I want to touch on that in a second, but I do have a few
Yeah,
questions first.
go for it. By the way.
So, when you were going about the process of selling that business, the hot dog
Yes.
stands, right? How did you go about doing it, and how long was the process of one, when you realized you wanted to sell the business, and two, when you were handed the check or however you were paid
Yep.
for that? What was the chronology there?
Well, so someone didn't buy both of them. So it was about a 6 month process to sell both of them. I sold the first one in about 90 days. And then the second one took about another 90 days after that. I just used a website called bizbuysell.com, which is still around today. And I used that website to list the businesses. People went on there, found them. They did some due diligence. We had some phone calls. They ultimately ended up buying. The first location. The second location, I was so ready to be done. I made a very big mistake selling it. I was just all I wanted to do was be done. I sold them both for about $80,000 each, somewhere ballpark that number. And I took a deposit from the buyer. I had a signed contract, but before I got the final check, I decided to train them the week before I got the final check so they could take over the day they gave me the final check. And when they got out there, they found out, damn, this is hard work. And they backed out on me. Now, they had to write me a slightly larger check of deposit money for me not to sue them, but they backed out on me. And I ultimately learned a very hard lesson that no one trains, no one comes into the business for more than inspections and cursory work until the check clears. So I had to sell that one twice, which is why it took longer to sell it, because I had to sell it twice. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, in all this time, you said you hit with your first business at about age 20, right? And that is
Yeah.
incredibly young, in my opinion, to be out there and be hustling and be hitting the levels of success that you did, right? And a lot of the things that you talked about a little bit earlier in the interview were about educating yourself, right?
Yep.
And how you went and you read books, you would stay at Barnes and Nobles, you'd read magazines and you'd educate yourself. For those who may be struggling to really get a foothold on this whole entrepreneurial thing, right? This whole world of entrepreneurship, what sources of education would you suggest to them in order to help them take their entrepreneurship game to the next level?
Yeah, I mean, look, the easiest and cheapest place to start is books, and you should be reading books. I go through about a book every other week right now. So I go through a lot of books, a lot of lesser extent magazines. I just can't, they don't get in depth enough. Obviously, I do some reading online as well. But if you want specific companies who are doing well in instruction for being an entrepreneur, you have Digital Marketer, who is fabulous. Especially if you're looking to go on the online world, or you're looking to use that to market your business. Digital Marketer is great, and you can find them at digitalmarketer.com or gkic.com, which is Glazer Kennedy Insider Circle. It's Dan Kennedy, the guy I originally talked about. That's the brand he has. They're very well. I studied and still do study them. I'm still a member, but I've been a member for 17 years, something along those lines. So very, very good information. Both those would be phenomenal places for people to go and learn from. But don't don't overlook books, man. I mean, there you can basically learn about anything you want, for $12, more or less.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things that I really like about books is that you can kind of get into the head of some people who may not even be around anymore, right? And
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
you have the people at Digital Marketer who are running the whole thing. That's actually where we met, so I'm glad you brought that
Yep.
up. You have the different people like Dan Kennedy who's still around and teaching, but then you have somebody like Dale Carnegie who
Mhm.
he's not around, but his ideas and his mindset live on through his works.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So you got to
All
comment
the
on.
stuff that these guys are teaching, not all of it, but the vast majority of the stuff that these guys are teaching, it's all stuff that was figured out in the 20s and 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s. They've just repackaged it into different stuff, maybe 60s and 70s as well. But yeah, they've all just repackaged it into different stuff. It's been around forever. There's not a whole lot being created new. I mean, there's this whole concept, which I won't go into unless you want me to, of the tripwire, and everyone talks about that, but that's been going on for 50 years. I mean, it's been being used forever. But there's a whole bunch of young folks who are just hearing about this for the first time, right? And that's great. I don't care where you learn it, but just understand it didn't originate from Perry Belcher. He might have named it, but that's not the guy who created it. It was created a long time ago. Even Dan Kennedy's stuff, most of that stuff was figured out, you know, a couple decades before that guy was born, and he's 60 something years old. So I mean, it's there's very little new out there. It's just different media. I mean, AdWords is just classified ads. That's all it is. Google AdWords, they're just classified ads. And you can go get a course on how to do classified ads, and then bump it up against making sure you're not violating any of the rules and regulations for Google, and create better Google ads than most people who are creating Google ads right now. Because there's so many courses out there on how to create a classified ad, and you can probably get them at garage sales for $5 at this point, or some online eBay. You can probably get them at eBay, right?
Absolutely, that's a really good point. That a lot of the things that we hear today, and a lot of the stuff that people are consuming, is recycled and
Yeah,
repackaged, and maybe somebody adds their own personal touch to it.
sure.
But it's all out there, right? And
It's out there.
I think one of the biggest takeaways from that is, regardless of what industry you're in, or what path you're on, or where you are on that path, there are always resources available to you. You just
Yeah,
have to put forth the effort to look, and you have to be proactive in educating yourself, because nobody's going to educate you without you putting forth the effort to
totally.
let them do that. So
Yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up that point. Um, but you also talked about how early on you realized that you had to better yourself, and
Yep.
you really started to get into personal development, and to really learning. Can you talk about we talked about some ways to do it, but can you talk about, just at its core, why it's so fundamentally important that we, not only as entrepreneurs but as people, are always trying to improve ourselves and always trying to better ourselves in everything that we do?
Well, I mean, one, I just think you lead a more satisfying life by doing that, right? I mean, it's just, I'm baffled by these studies where I see people haven't read books after college for years and stuff like that. I'm just shocked by them, But here's the thing: if you're not getting better especially today, someone is passing you by, and a lot of someones are passing you by. And so, if you're going to stand still and you're going to just say, hey, I'm going to do my same old thing, then do not complain to me when AI takes your job. Or don't complain to me when you get fired or you miss that promotion, because I'm not going to have any sympathy for you. I'm going to have exactly zero. And now I get it. Sometimes good people get caught up, who are doing the right thing. They get caught up in the changes of technology. And those people I do have sympathy for. I do feel for them, right? But it is your job and your responsibility to improve yourself. It's your job and your responsibility to get the skills and develop the skills to go to the next level and be ready for that promotion when it comes around. It is no one's responsibility to hand it to you. Unfortunately, we do live in a world that to some extent thinks that they're entitled to. And I'm not talking about, I know a lot of people talk about millennials that way. I work with a bunch of millennials. That's not how I feel about probably 90% of the people I work with, okay? But we live in a world that feels that they are entitled to something, and you are entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You are not entitled to anything else. If you want more than that, you go bust your ass and go get it. It's on you to go get it. No one's going to give it to you.
I love that message. I absolutely love that message. And I think that you're absolutely correct. That if we don't really take it into our own hands, it's not gonna happen. Yeah. It's not gonna come to us. Yeah. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. But let's move on a little bit with your history.
Yeah.
So after the hot dog stands and you sold it, had that great learning lesson, what did you do next?
So I started a dry cleaning company, pickup and delivery dry cleaning business. And, I had to wear dry cleaning for my sales job. And so I thought, man, I would have loved someone to pick up and deliver my dry cleaning for me. It was such a pain to go in and get these clothes. And that business started that in 2002. That business was sold by me going door to door. I sold new customers going door to door because I needed them all in the same neighborhood, right? So I picked a neighborhood. That was the Tuesday pickup route. And I needed to go get as many customers in that neighborhood as possible to make this business work. And so we went from $0 to about $30,000 a month in revenue in a little over 12 months with me going out, pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, and selling people door to door, which is a brutal way to sell, but it teaches you a lot of really good business lessons. So.
Absolutely. So can you talk about, when you're going door to door, can you talk about some of those brutal lessons? I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, I think the first thing is you just got to be willing to take a lot of rejection. And I know this is going to be hard for some of you guys to believe, but even as good looking as I am, I was used to rejection. Girls would reject me from time to time. And I know some of you guys are shocked watching this video, and I get it. I am too a little bit. But you gotta get a lot of rejection. You got to realize that for every no, there's a yes coming. I had to figure out, remember I said you had to ask 5 times to get people to buy? I actually figured out you don't have to ask 5 times in that business. You got to ask twice. All I had to do was ask twice. And if I could ask twice, I had an 80% close ratio if they were used dry cleaning services. And so I had to figure that out. And I had to figure out the right times. How can I maximize my time? So 5 o'clock to 8 o'clock, that was the time to go knock on doors, right? And the weekends, first thing in the morning on the weekends. And so I had to go maximize my time. I had to go maximize my efforts. And so, it was just perseverance. To be honest with you, it's just, hey, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna beat this thing. And I had to remember every time I got a yes, I was making more money. And it wasn't just one-off money. I was making residual money. These people were going to use me month in and month out. And I was building a company that I ultimately sold for a couple $100,000. And that was the message. And it was just, it was hard work, but it's what you had to go do.
Absolutely. Now, to go from 0 to 30,000 in 12 months. That's awesome, right? And for a lot of people, when you think 30,000 a month, that is freedom, man. That is living the dream, right? That is well over 6 figures. So could you talk about specifically the steps that you took business-wise? And you talked about going and literally selling door to door and making the sales, but what other things did you really have to develop and learn about and improve in order to get and sustain that 30,000 a month revenue?
Yeah, so I had to. First I had to develop partnerships because I didn't own the facilities to do dry cleaning, right? So I had to go find someone. I had to negotiate a contract, a 50-50 split, and they would do all the dry cleaning. I would go get all the customers. I'd pick up and deliver the clothes, and so I had to go negotiate that contract. I had to work on my customer service skills. So what I found is that dry cleaning is a commodity. So the only thing I could distinguish myself, around was customer service. I had to have the best customer service on the planet, and dry cleaners are known for having horrible customer service. So, good news, it wasn't very difficult to have the best when everyone has horrible, but I still had to have the best. I had to be on top of it. I had to work on my sales messaging. What message was I going to put out? We ran into an issue where people would forget to put out their bags. So I had to figure out a way to get them to put out their dry cleaning bag on their day, and so we used this software that would call, and I'm drawing a blank on what it's called right now, but it will call and remind them. It'll leave like a voice message, or if they pick it up live, it will call and remind them to put out their value. Voice broadcast, that's what I'm looking for. We had to use some voice broadcast software, and this was not software I could get online in 2002. I had to buy hardware, spend a couple $1,000, and then shoot these messages out every single day. We had to make sure our billing was on point. I mean, all the little things that you have to do to make a business run.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there are a few really important things that I want to touch on that you said. And the first one is that in order to make the business run, you have to get all these little things in place, right? You have to have your customer service, you have to have your sales, you have to have your partnerships, you have to have all these individual things. And it's difficult to not only identify what those things are, but to get them and make sure you stay on top of them, right? So that is a problem for a lot of entrepreneurs, right? But what I think the beauty of it is, once, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but once you identify it and figure it out, you have it, right? Like you figured it out. So can you touch on kind of that moment where you got all that stuff up and running, you had it going, and you were like, finally, like, I have my business and it's successful, right? Like, what did that feel like, and what did you exactly do in order to get there?
Well, so here's the thing. When you first do anything, you're starting out and you're figuring it out. And where people make a mistake is they don't then develop a system once they figure it out. And you need to have a system and process and routine. Every Monday I get up, I do X, right, at 8 a.m. or whatever time it is. So I'll give you one example. About 3 days a week, and this is just in my business right now, 3 days a week, when I get up in the morning, more or less the first thing I do is go in and sit at my computer and I do my writing. Okay, so I need to write, whether it's articles for my newsletter, I'm working on a new book right now, so I got to write for that. I got to, maybe I need to create a new lead magnet, whatever it is. I have a list of stuff I need to do. I write at least 3 days a week. And it's typically Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So those are my days. Now, unless there's travel or something, I'm on vacation or whatever, that doesn't change. I write 3 days a week. And it's a system and a process, and that's how I get all my work done. Okay, it's the same thing here, right? You create the system, you create something that works, and then you have to systematize it. You want the McDonald's theory. You want the idea that I can take any 14-year-old and plug them into this system, and I can make it run. Now, maybe it's not quite that simple, right? Maybe you can't plug a 14-year-old in, but you get the theory. How simple can I make it? Where can I bring it down so it's the least skilled and educated person to do this system? And if that for you is someone who needs a 4-year college degree and 3 years of experience, then that's fine. That's your business. I'm fine with that. But if we can bring it down to someone who only needs a high school diploma, then that's where you should bring it down to. Okay, how simple can I make it? But what they do is entrepreneurs create their system, but it's only a system that they can run. Well, that doesn't work, and that's why you hear people say stuff like, "No one can do it as good as me." The moment you say that, you failed. You failed. That's not scalable. You can't scale a business with no one can do it as good as me. There should be nothing on this planet. I want to be the dumbest guy sitting in the room when I'm speaking with my team, not the smartest guy sitting in the room. We're doing something wrong. Maybe in the very beginning I'm the smartest guy, but as you scale and as you grow, you need to be the dumbest guy sitting in the room, or gal. And so it's all about just setting up systems and processes. And that's the unsexy, unglamorous side of running a business. But right now I have roughly 55 employees. You want to run a business, you want 55 employees, you better have systems and processes, or you'll never, ever, ever even dream of getting there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I agree with you to the extent that you absolutely have to have those systems and processes, and especially if you're managing people. But then there comes into play, and it's a caveat that I think is just an interesting thing to talk about. Somebody who is the brand, right? And,
sure.
And who comes to mind is somebody like Tony Robbins,
okay.
Right? And so I think there's kind of the two models of somebody who wants to be the face of the company, and who wants to be leading the charge and being the one who's in the public and speaking and creating content. But then there's also the other side of more like what you're saying of, I want to be the guy who or gal who put together all these processes and putting the people in place to make sure those processes run, and just kind of taking my foot off the gas and letting it go on its own, right? So could you maybe talk a little bit about that distinction?
So a little bit. I understand what you're saying. I disagree a little bit, and here's why. Tony Robbins, for example, if he doesn't have a massive team behind him, he can't be the brand. So it's okay for you to eventually be the person who is the guru. That's fine. You want to be that? No problem. You better have the systems and processes in place behind you so that someone else can do them. Now, at this point, I can create systems and processes, but that's not my native genius. I'm not like the best guy in the world at creating systems and processes, but I've hired people who are really good at doing it. So I give them my ideas and then they can turn them into systems and processes. And that's completely fine. When you first start out, you're gonna have to do it on your own. But in the beginning, you'll have to do it on your own. That works. But today, I'm definitely my job is to work on strategy, the vision of the company. It's to be the face of the company, do stuff like this. I was speaking to a 200 orthodontists on Saturday. That's my job today. It's not to go and manage day-to-day operations. No one other than a manager, like a high-level manager calls in sick to me. I mean, they have other people they report to. There's systems and processes that don't require me to run the day-to-day operations. Right. So you start small, but then you can grow into more. Less you doing and more you pointing, in a sense.
Absolutely, and I'm really glad that you you brought in that distinction that even somebody like Tony Robbins, who is the face of the brand, he absolutely has an enormous team behind him. And I'm really glad you brought that up. So thank you for that. But there's one other thing that you were talking about earlier that you said helped you succeed. That I think is really important, and I think we should dig a little bit deeper into, and that is forming partnerships.
Okay.
Right? So could you talk about maybe besides that 50-50 partnership you made with that dry cleaning business, some other partnerships that you made that have helped you become successful, and the importance of making those partnerships as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, partnerships are one of the easiest ways to scale a business, right? So there are other people out there who have my customers, my ideal customers. And if I can just go find them and work a deal, whether that's economic deal where I'm paying them, whether that's a deal in trade where I'm doing stuff for them, they're doing stuff for me, whether it's a hybrid version of that, whatever it is, if I can go work a deal, then I can scale very quickly. So we've made Inc. magazines. So my company Newsletter Pro has made Inc. magazine's 500 fastest growing companies list 2 years in a row. So the first time was at spot 120, and the second time was at spot 343. We've made it 50% of that growth came on the back of partnerships. So these were people who we have strategic partnerships with. Some of them we pay, some of them we trade, some of them we do both. And we go out and speak at their events. That's what I was doing on Saturday. I have a partner who was having an event. I flew out on my dime. In fact, I even paid for a booth on my dime, and I spoke, and we were going to make some sales off of that, right? We have partnerships with GKIC, who I mentioned before as well too. Sometimes we speak at their events, sometimes we just exhibit, sometimes we provide content, sometimes we shoot their content out to our list. It just varies. But partnerships, there are people out there who have your ideal customer, and if you can build those relationships, you can do it. Now, most people they want to build that relationship by doing it via email or just a phone call, and that does work to some extent, but the best way to build that relationship is face-to-face and in person. And so if you're willing to get out from behind the computer, go out there, meet some people, shake some hands, kiss some babies, partnerships are absolutely amazing for growth.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely brilliant. And like you said, partnerships are one of the most fantastic ways to scale and to build. They're amazing. So after you did the dry cleaning business, well, actually, let's talk a little bit about the dry cleaning business. How did you exit from that, and what was your incentive to exit? Like, what made you want to get out of that business?
Well, I was moving. There's a couple things. One, it was a business that just couldn't scale much larger than I had made it. Two, I was moving my family out of state, out of California to Boise, Idaho. We wanted to go move there, better place to raise our kids. And so it was just time to go. And I actually sold it to the guy who I had a partnership with. So he wasn't a 50-50 partner in the sense that he owned half my business. He was a 50-50 partner in the sense that I split the revenue generated from those customers with him, right? And so I sold it to him, and he bought it and wrote me a check. And so it was a very simple transaction to get out of that one.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Yeah.
So then, once you did make your move, and once you did get out of that business, what did you
Mhm.
do next?
Well, so I wanted to form a marketing agency, but was a little bit scared, as we talked about in the beginning. And the economy was starting to get a little shaky. I wasn't sure how that was going to go. So actually, I did start another dry cleaning business here in Idaho. Had that for 4 years before I sold it again to the dry cleaner for even a lot more than I sold the last one. So it ended up working out really well. And right before I sold that one, about a year before I sold that one, I started my company that I have today, Newsletter Pro.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, could you maybe talk a little bit about the core competencies of Newsletter Pro, and what y'all truly maybe frame it from this perspective. What is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then talk about how Newsletter Pro is the best at solving that problem.
Yeah, so we're trying to solve the problem of the how impersonal marketing has become. We're trying to solve the problem of how small businesses lack media. So they think they have media, right? But even this I assume is going to go on iTunes. Am I right?
Yeah, it's actually going to go to a variety of platforms like Facebook, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and a few others.
Perfect, right? So that is media, but media that someone else technically owns, right? YouTube could decide they're going to ban you, and that would be unfortunate for everyone. And but they could. I've been banned from AdWords before in one of my companies that we had because they didn't like all the ads we were running, right? A lot of us have been banned from Facebook, and then now we have new Facebook accounts. I mean, that's pretty typical. And and so I wanted to give them something that they own, and then something that worked. So we learned in the dry cleaning company that newsletters worked. We could get more referrals out of them. We could get higher customer retention, which in turn meant higher lifetime value. We just had to do them. We had to do them right, and they were such a pain to do. So we found a way to do that, and do it in a way where we ghostwrite it, so it sounds like the client wrote it, but without them actually having to write a single word. And then we can give them the strategy that actually makes it work. So they now have owned media that they can use to trade. They can use to promote their own products and services in, and they can use to build those relationships to increase their lifetime value. And realistically, no one can take it away from them. It's their media.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, let's get technical here, right? We've been providing a lot of value, and I want to thank you for that. But I think we
Yeah,
can
you're welcome.
step it up a notch, right?
Okay.
So when a company is putting out a newsletter, let's say they wanted to do this on their own, right?
Okay.
What steps do they need to go to make sure that they're putting out the highest quality, sustainable newsletter?
So first they need to understand that there's a ratio. It's about 75% of either content that is entertainment type of content, right, or edutainment type of content. I've heard it's called, or is content that is personal relationship building content. So if I was to write the front page of the newsletter, that is almost always going to be an article where I'm talking about what's going on in my world, right? So think about a very long Facebook post, right? And so it's going to be an 800-word Facebook post is what it's going to be, with pictures and all that kind of stuff. And so this is going to be, my status update, and this is where I'm going to build that relationship, right? Then I'm going to go into page 2, and I'm going to write content that's going to be beneficial to my reader. So if my reader is mom, who's 35 years old and older, then I'm going to write an article that's going to make sense for mom. I'm not going to write about an article that makes sense for grandpa, because grandpa is not my reader. So I'm going to publish something that makes sense for mom, that helps and benefits her life. When I talk about promotion, maybe at the bottom of page 2, I might promote my referral contest, or I might promote a new product or service, or highlight a new team member or an award we got. Depends on what I'm trying to build. Am I trying to build credibility and celebrity? Am I trying to promote referrals? What am I trying to do, right? So you got to figure out your strategy. Same thing at top of page 2. You might do the same thing. You might promote, that might be where the new product goes. It's up to you. Bottom of page 3, I'm going to do usually solely entertainment. Just going to have fun. On page 4, I'm going to have one section that's going to have headlines, because that's the part that's going to have the mail code on it and the address and stuff. And so I want headlines so they know what they're going to get when they open it. So I want to entice them to open it. And then I'm going to have a very useful article on the back of page 4, the bottom of page 4, where I'm going to talk about something that, again, benefits my ideal reader. So mom, 35 plus, or whoever the ideal reader is. That's going to help them and improve their lives because I need to get an open rate. And that would be the general outline of what you would put inside of a newsletter from a content standpoint.
Absolutely, and that was a ton of value, man. Thank you for that.
Cool. Yeah, you're welcome.
And there are a few things that I wanna dig into.
Yeah.
So you talked a lot about knowing your audience, right? And you know, if you want to write a newsletter to mom, it's going to be different than if you're writing a newsletter to grandpa, right?
Sure.
So how do you, one, really identify and dig into figuring out who you're writing to? And then how do you formulate the message based on that persona, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what you have to do is just got to dig into your customer base a little bit. And if you don't know, you're going to have to take an educated guess. Like if you don't have customers yet, you're going to have to take an educated guess. But you're going to dig in. Who is buying this? So, for example, if I'm in the services business and mom is always the one calling me on the phone to sign up, it's pretty clear who that's going to be. Who am I selling to, right? If I'm in financial services and I'm trying to get investments, I'm probably selling to grandpa, right? And because he's the one who has money, 55 plus person has money. And so I want to sell to him, right? And I want to talk about what's going on in his world and is going to help him. And so then you're just going to develop topics or categories. So if the cover's done for you, that is your article, that's your personal piece, right? But the top of page 2, that might be, let's say it's mom and you're a dentist. That could be a family-friendly event that's happening in your area next month. And you're going to talk about it. We just had this big kids expo fair here in Boise, and my wife took all my kids to it and had a great time and stuff. And so you might talk about, hey, look, kids expo's coming here. Here's all the cool, fun games and prizes and things that you can do there. And that might be, you might highlight that. So you're just gonna have to create categories, and then you can create, if you want, you can even create subcategories so you know what to go research and what to write about. But yeah, it's not, it doesn't have to be complicated once you make a plan.
Absolutely, and I like that a lot, that once you really figure out what you're doing, it's just more a matter of doing it and being consistent with it.
Execution.
And execution. So, when you're approaching it from the standpoint of, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm pretty sure I need a newsletter, but I'm not sure, right? When would be the appropriate time to start thinking about adding a newsletter and implementing that into your business?
So if you have a business that has repeat customers, right? So customers on a regular basis, or a longer sales cycle on leads. So someone who doesn't, you're not selling a widget that they, it's $10 that they buy or don't buy, right? And you think you need one. Because I found most things in life are that way, or in business are that way, right? If you think you need a new employee, you actually needed a new employee, 2 months ago. Okay, if you think you need a newsletter, then you actually need one now, right? And so by the time you really start thinking that you need it, you really needed it quite some time ago. It's like real estate, right? The moment you start watching on the news how hot the real estate market is, that is the absolute worst time to invest in the real estate market. So the moment that they're all talking about on the news, horrible time to invest in it. You want to be investing before everyone's talking about how great it is, because you've missed it at that point. So I think that it's the same thing in business. By the time you start thinking that you need it, you need it.
Absolutely. So, for that entrepreneur who, I can do it myself, I don't want to pay anybody to do this, or I don't want to, outsource it or whatever.
Yeah.
How much time would it take for an individual to do that themselves, right? To put together a full-fledged, extremely high-quality newsletter for their audience? How long would it take them to do that?
Probably 20 hours a month. So we're really, really good. This is all we do, and it still takes us 15 hours a month. So if it's taking us 15, probably taking someone who doesn't quite know what they're doing, doesn't have the system process in place, at least 20.
Right, and not only would it probably take them at least 20 hours, but that's 20 hours of not even getting it 100% right.
Sure.
in the
Yeah,
beginning,
absolutely.
right? And so, it would be testing and trying and doing this over and over and over again, and hoping that you're getting it right. And in addition to that, so at some point you might say, okay, well, I'll just pay somebody to do it, right?
Yep.
At what point should you consider outsourcing your newsletters, and what should you expect to be paying for that sort of service?
Yeah, so when you're sending about 500 pieces a month or more, that's probably when it's a good time to start outsourcing. And to do all the content creation plus the printing and mailing. So the printing and mailing is about $1 a newsletter, but when you add in content creation, that starts at about $1,000 a month to do that, to send about 500 newsletters. So that includes all the content creation, writing, graphic design, project management, editing, postage, printing, everything to get it out the door.
Fantastic, fantastic. So, for anybody that is listening right now who is thinking, I've been thinking I need a newsletter, or that sounds really interesting, I very highly encourage you to reach out to Shaun and see if there could be any sort of potential partnership between the two of you. This guy's a pro. He knows what he's doing. He's been doing it for a while. And as we talked about, there's so many different things to the newsletter, right? There's figuring out your audience, there's building all the content, there's mailing it all. All these are either time-consuming or very economically consuming activities that, for most people, it's not worth doing, right?
No.
I would rather spend time on my core competency, dealing with the stuff that's going to drive my revenue, that I'm the best at every single day, and I would rather outsource this to the pros. So the pros being Shaun, right? So Shaun, if somebody were interested in talking and taking the conversation further, how would they reach out to you in that regard?
There's two ways really. They can go to newsletterpro.com. We have a contact us section. They can call into our office there, or go to newsletterpro.com/free book, and I'll send them a complimentary copy of my book on newsletter marketing and some examples and some other really cool stuff in a what we call a shock and awe package. And so we'll get to see some pretty cool marketing if they do that as well.
Awesome. Very cool. So I highly encourage everybody to reach out to Shaun for that. He's a pro. The links are either going to be down in the description below, or wherever you're consuming this content, somewhere readily available to you. Again, highly encourage you to reach out to Shaun. He's a pro. So, that being said, Shaun, in your business, what do you think that your core competency is? Like what are you the best at?
For me, personally, I am probably the best. I'm probably the best at relationships. I'm very good at finding and building relationships. And then, I'm a giver, so I'm very good at giving in those relationships. And so it's very natural then if I need a favor or some help, it's usually very easy for me to make a phone call and get those favors and help reciprocated back to me, because we will bend over backwards to help our partners succeed. And we find that if we help, and our clients, and we find that if we help them succeed, then we succeed. So I'd say relationships.
Fantastic. So, we talked a little bit about your past, and we talked about what you're doing now, and we dropped some serious value bombs there, so I want to thank you for that. But what do you see moving forward, right? When you think about the future for Shaun, what does that look like?
Yeah, we're trying to scale up. We send about roughly 500,000 pieces of mail a month right now, about newsletters a month right now. We're trying to get to our big BHAG, which is 1 million pieces a month. And so, I will continue to build my team, grow my team, and then move my responsibilities away from day-to-day operations more into doing more things like this. Just more speaking, more creating content, that kind of a thing. So being the celebrity expert, for lack of a better word, in our space, and then building relationships with partners, helping them succeed. Providing as much value as we can there, and then doing the strategy. So watching what's happening in the marketing world, study what's happening, and then watching the shifts, and then shifting our product and our services to take advantage of the various shifts. And so that's kind of what my next 12 months will be morphing into.
Wow, that's incredible. That's awesome, man. So, besides the professional future, right? What does the personal future look like for you? Like what do you first of all, what do you like to do in your spare time when you're not working, and then what do you want to do as far as your personal goals moving forward?
Yeah, so I've got 5 kids, 4 of them still at home, and so I spend a lot of time with my kiddos in my spare time. And my wife, I found the secret to a happy marriage is to continue dating your wife, and so we date on a very regular basis, and so that consumes the vast majority of my time outside of work. A little bit of college football when it's college football season, and every now and again, a few of my buddies and I will jump on and play a video game or two, and that can be fun as well. So that's kind of what consumes my personal time. As far as where we're going, what I found is that you have to disconnect from business more frequently than I ever realized. So you have to get away, stop working for a little bit, allow your mind to kind of reset so you can come back in and go all in. So I'm working on making sure I take at least 4 vacations this year. Looks like I'm going to take 5. So I'm going to take 5 trips. And then I'm working on building, just additional revenue streams. As we've started to scale up, I've had some opportunities to invest in some other smaller companies and help them grow. And so when the right opportunity presents itself, I usually do that and then advise them. And so that's kind of what and I actually enjoy that because I don't have to get into the nitty gritty. I just get to do the fun part of helping them figure out the problems and the strategy and then move on. And so I actually see that more as fun than work. So that's kind of what I do personally. But yeah. So that's a little bit kind of boring.
Oh man, that sounds awesome. Taking trips, spending time with the fam, doing a little business. That sounds awesome, man. That sounds really cool. So, I have a few more questions for you. I really do appreciate your time. I can only imagine how busy you must be. But doing all the things that you've done and have being so as successful as you have been, you probably wear a lot of hats all the time.
Sure.
So, if you were to describe yourself to somebody else, how would you describe yourself?
I describe myself as that's a hard question because you don't think about that very often, right? So I would describe myself as a dad and a husband and a person who works extremely hard and cares a ton about his team and his clients, and but probably someone who works a little bit too much. So probably a little bit of still dad and husband first, but like all of us, I struggle to put the priorities in the right spot, right? So I end up putting work ahead of what really matters. But I think that's a lot of us do that. So
absolutely. So if you could go back and give yourself advice, right? Knowing what you know now, you could go back to any point in your life and give yourself advice. What time in your life would you go back to, and what advice would you give yourself?
That's an interesting question. I will tell you the advice. I wouldn't change anything because here's why. I feel like that all those experiences, even the bad ones, even the times where there was a point where we were so in debt and so poor, I considered bankruptcy. Even times when we couldn't, my wife had to come and ask me if it was okay to buy milk, and bread and eggs because we didn't have any food in the house. And I said, let me go to the post office and see if we had checks in the post office so I could put them in the bank so we could take a check so we could go buy food. Even the hard times, they've made me who I am today. And although I'm not a perfect man or even a great man, I'm happy with the man I am today. And so I actually wouldn't go back and change a thing. So maybe on a personal side, I might change a thing or two. I might not have said something hurtful, or we all have those regrets. But from a professional standpoint, I wouldn't be me today if I didn't have all those experiences. And so I wouldn't want to risk changing them and then being someone I don't like when I got back.
Absolutely. That was profound, man. That was profound. So, if you could go back to any time period, and you could talk to any person, right? Whether that person is past or still alive, whatever it may be, what time period would you go back to, and who would you talk to?
Well, So I'd go back and talk to my grandfather. So I miss him every day. So yeah, that's who I'd go back and talk to. He was a great businessman, just a hard worker. But yeah, I'd enjoy spending some time with him again. So
Very cool, man. Very
yeah,
cool. And I have two more questions for you.
yeah,
Again, I
yeah,
really do appreciate your time. So, we talked a little bit earlier about reading books and how important that
yes,
is. If you could give a top three
yeah.
books
Let me pull them
that
up.
that you would recommend, what would they be?
Yeah, let me get them. They're on my phone, so I'll tell you what they are in just a second. Um, one that I just absolutely love is Fanatical Prospecting by Jeb Blunt. It's a great book. Recently read that one. Um, Another one that I enjoyed that I read a year ago or so is Predictable Revenue by Mary Lou Tyler. That book was very good as well. That's a lot of sales stuff. So I'm into sales and marketing. So you get a lot of sales and marketing books. I read a lot of those. And let me find the third one that I absolutely loved. It was by a guy who worked. Actually, you know what? I'm going to give you this one instead. I did love this book too. It's called Uncontainable by Kip Tindall, who is the CEO and founder of the Container Store. And it's all about culture and growing people. And anyone who does not think that the people, you're not your customers, your employees are not probably your most important asset is kidding themselves, because your employees take care of your customers. And your customers are the ones who pay the bills and who build shareholder value, which if you're the owner, that's likely your value. And so we've been named best place to work in Idaho 2 years in a row, and it's some of the stuff we took from that or some of the reasons for that came from that book right there. And we very much value our culture here and growing it and making it better. So
Fantastic, man. That's awesome. So, my last question for you today
yeah.
is there anything about yourself that you think is an important part of who you are that I did not ask you about today? In other words, what did I miss?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, you asked a lot of questions. I think that that's a good question as well, too. You got to send these in advance. They're easier to answer when that happens. No, I would say that you might have missed the you might have missed the idea that we touched on a little bit, but I want to go back to the beginning because I think this is where a lot of people struggle. Guys, we are all scared at some point, right? We are all worried about the future. We are all scared of losing our money or something along those lines. And the bigger you get, it doesn't change. It doesn't mean you have less fear. It just means you have different fears, right? So, we're running a pretty decent sized company at this point, and I sit there and worry about stuff as well too. And you need to understand it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be it's never going to be 100%, and you got to just take the leap and take the risk, because it's small business that is going to make this economy great again. If I can steal a line from our current president, it's not the government, it's no one else, it's us. It's us. It's you and I. We're the ones who are going to do it. And so you taking that risk and being educated and finding help and finding support, that's what's going to make it happen. And don't worry about if you fall down. Get back up, brush yourself off, learn from it, move on. It's the best advice I could give anyone.
Absolutely. And, on that note, I want to thank everybody for listening. Shaun, you've been a great guest. I want to thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on the show. To everybody listening, y'all are the best. Thank you for the support. Always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I just want to thank you for continuing to come back to Project Egg. And this has been another Project Egg interview. Today we've been talking to Shaun Buck from San Francisco. Take care, everybody.
Thanks, guys.